Eddie Howe's Mags are finally almost back as we get a day closer to match day 2. But what match day 2 poses is a question that almost every manager and tactician and player in world football has been asking themselves for a long time now. How the fuck do you beat Pep Guardiola's Man City team? That's the challenge that Eddie Howe's got going into the weekend, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into how I think Newcastle can maybe look to do that this weekend with what we have at our disposal. So if you think I might have the answers and you're a little bit curious whether I do us a favour and stick around. Welcome back to the Black, the White and the Banter, Newcastle fans. I hope you're all having a fantastic week as we do edge a day closer to Newcastle United. Match day 2. After that 5-1 demolition of Aston Villa, sob on the halt, you can't help but look forward to it, can you? And they don't come much bigger than pretty much the biggest team in world football. I think that's fair to say. They have just won the Champions League. They have just won their 4th trophy in recent times as of the Super Cup that I watched a little bit of what was last night as I'm recording this. So we are coming up against Pep Guardiola's fantastic team. I'm not going to deny that. They are a brilliant side. But I'm not here to talk about Pep Guardiola and how much I love his baldy head. I am here to talk about the problem that Newcastle face in trying to stop Pep Guardiola's Man City on Saturday and come away with what would be a mouth-watering, pants-staining, pass the lubricant and close the curtains victory to say to the rest of world football, Newcastle United are really here. But before we get into that, Newcastle fans, drop me a little likey-loo. One of these, it's as close as I can make it look like the actual thumb that's under the video. One of them goes a very long way and it takes you no effort at all. And if you do like my opinion by the end of this video, whack that subscribe. You might not like my opinion. If you don't, that's totally fine. Thanks for giving us a try anyway. But I do want you to see as many people hit that subscribe as possible. And I will be going down to Manchester City, all aboard the away day bus for the first one of the season. Lots of boozy beverages, lots of drunken interviews, no doubt, and lots of match footage in and around what will be an interesting entrance to the match with the ID checks that are being put in place. Will my ticket be a dud? Will I have to go to the box office to prove my identification to them? Time will tell. That'll be frustrating if I'm about 6 or 7 pints deep. But we're not here to talk about that now. Let's get into the serious stuff. Now, what we are coming up against on Saturday is a different animal to any other beast we will play this Premier League season. It's one of the most competitive leagues in the world. It's one of the best leagues in the world. But the team does not come much better than Manchester City at the Etihad. They're brilliant. They dominate world football. They've got some of the best midfielders, the best striker currently, I think it's fair to say, and a pretty tidy defence as well, which I think Pep Guardiola has improved in the last 3 or 4 years. And there's so many questions on how you can beat them. Where do you even start? Is it a free hit? Do you accept a loss from the start? Not this Newcastle team. No. Eddie Howe is not wired that way. And we shouldn't be wired that way because look what we just did to Aston Villa on Saturday. Yes, it was one game, but we are creating a team of some pretty solid world-class footballers that I don't think are getting some of the credit that they deserve or getting put in that category. Bruno, Botman, Isak, Tonali, who's just been smashing it for Milan. These are very, very, very high-profile footballers, and there's not many teams going to be going to Manchester City with a spring in the step like we are on Saturday. But how does Eddie Howe approach this? So you might see it as the impossible task, but Manchester City can lose football matches. Manchester City, although very few, have lost football matches. And how have they done that? Well, first thing that I think is going to be hugely important on Saturday is set pieces. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say that as the first thing because Eddie Howe is not Sam Allardyce. He's not Fat Sam. Stood in the kebab shop. He's not telling the boys to just hoof it long. That's not what I mean when I say set pieces. What I mean when I say that is Manchester City last season, 28% of their goals conceded were from set pieces. Almost a third, which is a very, very big number. Even chances created was quite high from teams from set pieces. And Newcastle United need to take advantage of that. I'm not saying there's a reason. Maybe Pep Guardiola doesn't prioritise him in training. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But Manchester City, generally speaking, always look a little bit suspect. And when I say a little bit suspect, I'm saying that because they're the champions of England and they've just won the Champions League. So not suspect enough to lose matches because of it. But Man City also, interestingly, have the lowest, last season, again, these are all stats from last season, had the lowest rate of set pieces conceded. So they will do everything in their power to make sure they do not give them away. And is that because of possession of the football is so high for them? Yes, that's a very high possibility. But with the height that we have in Sven Botman, in Mr. Dan Burn if he plays, Joe Linton, Isak, we have some absolute beasts in our team. I would love to see the stats on who the tallest team in the Premier League is. We need to get in there. Now, what concerns me a little bit about that is because we, generally speaking, last year weren't very good at set pieces. We had all that height. We had Kieran Trippier on corners. Didn't really score from many. Free kicks from Trippier was about 8, and even that was very, very limited. One of them, of course, have been against Manchester City. So that needs to improve. Do I think Tonali will add a little bit to that? Yes, because he likes to put a ball in the box and he can share set-piece duties with Trippier. I don't know whether he will. Trippier's a proud man. He's our designated set-piece taker. I don't know. But we have more options now that can fling balls in. Manchester City don't like that, and that is an area of the game on Saturday that we are going to see some joy. Number 2, for me, is being smart with our press. We know Eddie Howe wants to press. I said on my last video, he creams his pants if he brings a footballer into the club who is all about high intensity and all about leading from the front. That's the identity that we are built upon as a foundation now. But Manchester City will soak up our team and the match if we press at every opportunity that we can. And I just do not think that's a smart tactic going into this game. When you look at the matches that have been that teams have won against Manchester City more recently or got joy, Tottenham when they won 1-0 in February when Harry Kane scored the winner. Brentford when they played, yes, admittedly a weakened team at the back end of last season. Brighton when they got a draw at the Amex, 1-1 at the back end of last season. What they did in these matches is they pressed at smart moments, and I think most of our joy is going to come if we don't always press the front three. If we press the front three, the goalkeeper from Manchester City becomes that extra man for them. His precision with his passing is on the opposite spectrum to Nick Pope. We all know Nick Pope's not great with his feet as much as we love him as a goalkeeper. They have an extra player in Edison with his vision and his quality with the ball at his feet. That's what they get when we press, and then we are a little bit short in that midfield, and Manchester City soak that up with whatever extra man they have when they overload us in an attack. And if we've pushed Gordon, Isak and Almiron all on the defenders, we lose them in that defensive area, in terms of being able to support our defence when Manchester City are attacking. I think we need to pick our battles. Of course we're going to press their defenders because that's how mistakes happen, but not every single time. Midfield, I think that's where we swarm them. This is a Manchester City team who are going to be without De Bruyne. Manchester City, when they lost 1-0 to Brentford, guess what player was not playing that day? Amongst a few others, but it was De Bruyne. De Bruyne, for Manchester City, is integral in making their midfield tick. He's integral in carrying the ball up the pitch. Rodri has a role. Of course he doesn't. I think Rodri's a wonderful footballer. But De Bruyne is that linchpin between the halfway line and really, really creating things in and around the box. Whether that's the pass onto a front three or whether that's him driving with the front three. He's not playing. We swarm that midfield. Joe Linton, that's his bread and butter. As long as he can stay on the pitch and not soak up 2 yellow cards. Tonali, the engine that he has, is going to be perfect for that on Saturday. Bruno probably is the weakest of the three in terms of that press, but I think the stats would probably suggest I'm being a little bit harsh there. We swarm that midfield, we force mistakes, and that leads me on to my next point. We need to take advantage on Saturday of errors from Manchester City. Every team that's beat Man City more recently has taken advantage of an error, including when Spurs beat them 1-0. Harry Kane's goal, which was one of their only shots on target in the 15th minute of that game, was from recovering the ball where Manchester City surrendered it quite deep in their own half. And that's what we need to be clinical with. We got chances at Manchester City earlier in the season when we got beat 2-0. We were very respectable that day, but we didn't take them. Callum Wilson fluffed his lines from a couple of yards out from a cross. Isak has to be clinical. Gordon, who I'd always be a bit concerned about in them areas, needs to be clinical. And we just need to... Manchester City will make mistakes. Don't forget they've just won a Super Cup. They will have celebrated that Super Cup. They played 120 minutes plus penalties, which could not have gone better for us, if I'm being totally honest with you. And a celebration will have followed. You don't win a trophy and then go home to bed. That just doesn't happen. Then they've travelled back. So we're not going to see the freshest, because then they have to play a Saturday rather than a Sunday. We're not going to see the freshest Man City team. And we are seeing not the freshest without Kevin De Bruyne, who in my opinion is the best midfielder in the world in what he does. He's absolutely incredible. He's one of my dream ultimate signings for Newcastle. So we need to be on guard and be taking advantage of those mistakes. Another point for me, next on the list, is what do we have in the tank? And what I mean by that is the only way you beat a Manchester City team is by those fitness levels being optimal. Can we match them for the full 90 minutes on legs, on press, on concentration, on very, very tight man marking in the midfield areas? I would love to say yes. I would love to answer that question with yes, but I'm not sure. And Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp has had so much joy against Manchester City. Why? Because they have had... We know what the Liverpool teams of past years. You might not like to say anything positive about them. I get that. But Liverpool, especially around the time they won the league, their engines on their players, I've seen nothing like it, and how they pressed for the full 90. A Liverpool team of 2 to 3 years ago with your Manes, your Salahs, all of them, was just an animal of a press, and the fitness levels were crazy. So can we match them there? I would like to hope so. I really would. We've got a spring in our step. We've had a full week to train for this, and what I saw on Saturday was a team absolutely raring to go. So that's an interesting one. Finally, when you look at the stats, there are two ways to try and play Man City. You can either play it long and play it safe and let Man City have some of the ball. It's worked for some teams. It has worked for some teams. Brentford, who I mentioned, who chose their moments when to press, generally speaking, for at least a half of that game, they let Manchester City do whatever they wanted and sat back a little bit and tried to hit them on the counter. Crystal Palace, who were actually 2-0 up at the Etihad, sat back and hit them on the counter. It can work, but that is not Eddie Howe's DNA, and I do not think Eddie Howe will do that for a second. So then it comes down to, can we play them at their own game? Well, I think this Newcastle team, with the spring in the step that I just mentioned, can play Manchester City at their own game. We just have to be smart with it. We need a little bit of lady luck. We need to be clinical from set pieces, clinical in chances that we get, smart in the press, and pounce on any mistakes that this Manchester City team, at times when they have so much of the ball, once they get their spells of rhythm in the game, will make. It's an exciting prospect. It's the one that I'm actually fascinated by on how Eddie Howe approaches this one. He's lost to Manchester City last season. He learns from that every time. He'll have watched the Super Cup earlier in the week. He'll have studied everything there is to study on this team. Can we keep Eric Haaland quiet? Can we put one on their bigger players? De Bruyne's not in there, but they still have a luxury. And can we spring a surprise at the Etihad on Saturday? Come on! Newcastle fans, I hope this was a bit of an interesting insight for you into how we can beat Manchester City. I'm going to be going into what my team would be based off the back of some of the points I've made in this video on my match preview, which will come tomorrow. And then, of course, it's the boozy match vlog down to a social club that we've got booked out, and I cannot wait. That's why the Manchester away days are the best, so you don't want to miss that vlog. Let me know in the comments anything you think I've missed on how we should be approaching this match. Let us know whether you think we can do it, whether we can actually do it and make that huge statement to the world. And I will see you on a proper match preview before we get into the nitty-gritty of Manchester City away. Hardest and biggest game of the season. I'm ready for it, and I think the boys are as well. See you on the next one. How are you, the lads?